It's actually rather amazing that Newt hasn't spoken at P&P before. He's written something like 24 books, a number of them bestsellers. However much you might or might not agree with him politically, he's always been considered a bold and counterintuitive thinker. In one New York Times profile of him not too long ago, Paul Ryan, the Wisconsin congressman, was calling Newt a total idea factory. And not only does he have lots of thoughts about lots of things, he speaks with a sense of certainty and plain-spokenness on policy issues that can be especially appealing. He's demonstrated this again in his new book, Breakout, which sees much possibility and promise in America's future. He describes new technologies and scientific innovations on the verge of breaking loose in medicine, in education, in energy, in transportation and government, but warns they could be obstructed by what he calls the prison guards of the past: special interest groups, powerful lobbyists, and government bureaucrats. The biggest enemy to a more prosperous America, he suggests, may not be terrorists, but things like punitive taxes, stifling regulation, and hopelessly outdated policies. And we have a very special, Gingrich doubleheader this afternoon, because Callista, as you can see, is also here and also has a new book, Yankee, Doodle, Dandy. It's the third in the Ellis the Elephant series. And this time, Ellis, the time-traveling pachyderm, goes back in American history to the Revolution and the fight for independence, where he encounters Patrick Henry, Paul Revere, the Founding Fathers, Betsy Ross, and others. And I think the way we're going to do this is Callista's going to speak first, and then Newt will follow her, and then there'll be time for questions and a signing. So, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Callista and Newt Gingrich.
Thank you so much. It's good to see so many of you here. My name is Callista Gingrich, and I'm here today to talk about my book, Yankee, Doodle, Dandy. And Yankee, Doodle, Dandy is the third volume in my Ellis the Elephant series. And this is a series that offers a guided tour of American history for 4 to 8-year-olds. And in Yankee, Doodle, Dandy, Ellis the Elephant, who is my time-traveling pachyderm, discovers the American Revolution and how we became a free and independent nation. The two books that preceded this book are Sweet Land of Liberty, where Ellis discovers the pivotal moments that have shaped our nation. And the second book is called Land of the Pilgrim's Pride, where Ellis explores colonial America, or how our nation began. So that brings us to Yankee, Doodle, Dandy. I write these books because I love America, and I believe America truly is an exceptional nation. And I think it's more important now than ever that our children understand just how special this country is. And unfortunately today, many of our kids are failing to learn our American history, including our founding principles and our values, and instead learning revisionist or politically correct history. And as a result, really have no understanding of our basic United States history. So, my inspiration in writing these books is to find a creative way to introduce our children to our American history. I really see these books as patriotic books and a celebration of our nation. They aren't meant to be Republican books or conservative books, but a way to teach our children about our rich heritage. And with that, I will turn it over to Newt, and thank you so much for being here tonight.
Let me say, well, first of all, we're delighted to be here, and this is a very famous bookstore. So actually, the reputation was such, I wasn't sure you guys would let us come. So now I'm doubly thrilled to be here, and I totally applaud your desire to have everybody have a chance to have a place to come and share ideas. But I want to say about Ellis the Elephant and what Callista's doing. She probably got as definitive a reinforcement as she'll ever get. Last night we were taping Raymond Arroyo's program on EWTN, and Raymond's daughter has the first 2 volumes. I think she's 8 or 9 years old. And they were at Williamsburg, and they were walking down the street, and she turned and she said to her father, you know, Ellis has been here. Now, that's when you're really beginning to connect and bring things alive in a way that's very exciting. Let me just say that Breakout is my 27th book. And I think it is, by a huge margin, probably the most important book. And the reason is, I think we are stuck in kind of a right-left meltdown in which we really have almost institutionalized incompetence. And I'll give you an example. One of the things I'm working on right now is to replace oversight hearings with foresight hearings. And let me just give this one minor example. The classic oversight hearing, the congressmen bring in the bureaucracy. The bureaucracy explains that the terribly stupid thing that was done was really terribly stupid. Each member of Congress expresses their shock at how stupid the stupid thing was. And at the end of it, they all say they hope in the future they will not be as stupid as they were being stupid there together. And nothing changes. I mean, my favorite recent example, and I get a lot of my material just by reading the news media. And my favorite recent example was the Internal Revenue Service has sent $4 billion last year in refunds to people who don't exist or are crooks. They sent 585 checks to one house in Singapore. And since we're now at CNN and I do Crossfeather, I'm trying to get CNN, which is a worldwide system, to actually have their Singapore branch go and film the house. They apparently sent over 850 checks to one house in Lithuania. Now, I mean, $4 billion isn't big money. But if you were to go out to NIH and say to them, if we could take the $4 billion back from the crooks and give it to the researchers, how much more could you do? It makes a difference. And historically, the answer is systemic. But nobody in Washington thinks systemically. American Express, Visa, and MasterCard have to fight fraud every day. And they fight it in real time. The American Express fraud rate is 0.06 of 1%. The Medicaid rate in New York is over 10%. Now, that's a system. It's not that the bureaucrats are dumber or nastier or more venal. It is if you're trapped in a paper system in a world of iPads, you're going to lose. Because you got people who just simply can move so much faster than you. And so you've got to have systemic responses. So I began looking, and the reason I call it Breakout is I think the choice we face is as interesting and as big as it has ever been in American history, and it's between breaking out into an extraordinarily new world and breaking down. And you could take the IRS $4 billion example as a breakdown. You could take the current website as a breakdown. I mean, without getting all involved in politics, it is astonishing in the country that invented websites and that had actually from the signing of the bill a month longer than World War II for the Americans. From Pearl Harbor to victory over Japan is 1 month shorter than from signing the bill to this month. Now, this is a systems problem. These are well-meaning people who don't have any understanding of what they're doing, taking control of a project that should have been run by the people, frankly, who supported the president for re-election. I mean, if he had brought in the founders of Google and the founders of Facebook and comparable people and said, you're now my steering committee, it would have worked on October 1st. But it would have been a totally different model. And one which, by the way, would be illegal right now. I actually had this experience. I helped Bremer design the Office of Health Information Technology at HHS, which he did as a volunteer in the Bush White House. And then Tommy Thompson, the Secretary of HHS, appointed him. And this was a huge deal. This is a guy who's a brilliant Wharton PhD in finance, an MD, had been extraordinarily successful in Silicon Valley. He's going to bring entrepreneurial drive and information technology savvy. So we had a huge meeting at the Willard, and we had about 300 people who cared about this topic who were really experts from all over the private sector, academics, government people. And Tommy Thompson, who had been a very aggressive governor in Wisconsin, people would jump up with an idea, and he'd say, that's terrific, we'll start doing it tomorrow morning. And somebody else would jump up and say, I have this, we could fix this thing here. And say, great, you're now in charge of a committee to do it. So the guy who created all this goes in the next morning for his first day as a full-time federal government employer. The first person to come visit him Anyone want to guess who it was? Take a try. Who would you guess is the first person to walk in his door in his brand new office in his excited entrepreneurial mentality? It's the general counsel. And the top lawyer for HHS says to him, Tommy Thompson yesterday broke 7 laws. Because you cannot, and this is what the president alluded to yesterday, he's exactly right. You cannot, under current federal law, move quickly. You got to have public notice, periods of comment. You have, I mean, the number of layers we've invented is astonishing. If you took the guys who founded Google, dropped them into the federal bureaucracy, and made them obey the law, they would learn rapidly to be less competent. Because they couldn't move. I mean, and this is a systems problem. This is not a personnel problem. This is not a Democrat or Republican problem. This goes to the very core of where we are. Now, here's the upside. So Breakdown's over here. You're watching it regularly. Here's the Breakout side. We have pioneers of the future all over this country doing amazing things. In some ways, I think the closest to science fiction is regenerative medicine. Regenerative medicine is when they take your cells, so that you're not going to have a transplant, you're going to have a replant. They're going to take your cells, they culture them and grow a large quantity of them. Now they're starting to use 3D printing. So they then print out a new kidney or a new heart or a new spleen or a new liver. And then they put it back in you. Well, you don't need any kind of rejection medicine because it's not a transplant. Since they're putting you back in you, you accept it. And in fact, the Texas Regenerative Medicine Institute, I was with Governor Rick Perry, and we were talking about regenerative medicine. He said, yeah, the woman who heads the brand new Texas Regenerative Medicine Institute has just built a heart with a 3D printer. So a generation from now, the Dick Cheneys of the world won't get transplants. They'll get replants. People who are currently on kidney dialysis will get new kidneys. They won't stay on dialysis. These are really amazing things, and they're not science fiction. They're happening in laboratories all over the country. Self-driving vehicles. Google has a car which has driven itself 600,000 miles on California roads. The only time it's been in a wreck, a human being rear-ended it. And the people who first developed it, Sebastian Thrun believes that the odds are within 2 or 3 years, the car is going to be literally usable, that it'll be so close to solving every kind of problem you throw at it that you won't notice it on a highway. Now, that sounds a little bit like science fiction. So I was out in Peoria, Illinois, at the Caterpillar plant, standing next to a 40-ton truck, which is the biggest truck Caterpillar makes. And they have now sold 24 of them to a mine in Western Australia because they can use it 24/7, except for maintenance and putting diesel fuel in. And they save about $1 million a year per truck. The U.S. Army is working with Oshkosh to build a truck for the very practical reason that if you're going to have a roadside bomb, they don't want a human being to get hurt. And so you could actually end up with a convoy that had 1 or 2 humans and 12 or 15 vehicles. Totally different model. And you can go through these. The last one I want to give you, just as an example of how extraordinary this is. I believe deeply and passionately in education. Online learning is going to change the process of education as much as Gutenberg and the printing press. And none of us understand yet how many different ways it'll change. But if you take, for example, the Khan Academy, which you can all go take a look at, Salman Khan has built a system which has 3,000 hours of learning material, no, not lectures, but learning material in a very wide range of topics. They now get 10 million visitors a month, and it's all free. Udacity just signed a contract with Georgia Tech, and a $70,000 master's degree in advanced computing, residential master's, will now become a $7,000 online master's degree. That's 90% reduction in cost. Think about student loan impact. But it also means if you're an adult and you're already working but you need this degree, you can get it in the mornings, on the weekends, during your vacation. You're not forced to quit your job or take a year of absence, go to Atlanta, live in Atlanta. It's a very different model. And all this stuff's coming down the road in ways that are going to be extraordinary. And so I tried to put together, and I want to introduce Ross Worthington was my primary helper in doing this, the books, Newt Gingrich with Ross. He knows an immense amount. He knows far more than he ever thought he would about all of these various pioneers of the future. And we keep finding new ones every week. I mean, we may presently start putting out a daily little bulletin that's just the things you just clip out of the news media of all the cool things. It's probably called Breakout and Breakdown. And we'll give you both sets. But there's so many things happening. Now, my job, and I failed at this when I ran for president, it is immensely difficult to get the political media of this country to cover ideas. I mean, if you were to Google Double Down, which is essentially a collection of gossip, you will find that every political show in the country talked about it for weeks because they know how to talk about gossip. They love it. It's easy, it's simple, it's people. You don't have to think, you don't have to learn anything new. And then you try to go to them and say, let me tell you what regenerative medicine is going to mean in replacing kidney dialysis so people can go to work, live a full life. It's not only going to save money, it's going to liberate human beings. And they go, well, how do we get that on the show? That's boring. Or you say, let me tell you what brain research means for Alzheimer's or for autism. Well, that's weird because it doesn't fit how the political news media has defined the news. And so it's very exciting. I mean, I think we're at the edge of an amazing range, whether you're talking about energy, where we are now the largest natural gas producer in the world, which nobody, including me, would have believed possible in 2003. I mean, in 2003, the American chemical industry thought the whole industry was going to go overseas because the cost of natural gas was skyrocketing. And nobody thought you would produce so much. Now, in state after state, we're discovering fields so huge that the Marcellus Shale in Pennsylvania, New York, Ohio, West Virginia probably has a 200-year supply by itself. And people are making a lot of money. 180,000 jobs now in Pennsylvania. North Dakota now has such a vibrant economy. I tell people I am worried about inequality, which I am. I think inequality is a big challenge for us as a country. In North Dakota, in the last 8 years, wages have gone up 50%, which is a very interesting way to start dealing with inequality. McDonald's in North Dakota now pays a bonus if you'll come to work because it's such a tight labor market. It's a different world. So I think we're on the edge of an exciting thing. The way I describe it to a lot of people is Callista, through her books, is teaching young Americans why we have been an exceptional country and how it happened. I'm trying to teach the parents what we need to do to remain an exceptional country and what's possible for us to break out and have an extraordinary future. So we'd be glad for a few minutes, if it's okay, to take questions for either one of us.
Newt, I'm Sid Butler. I remember working with you years ago, and I want to give you a plug in front of this possibly hostile crowd. You worked with me and Terry Maple and others very closely on the Endangered Species Act, and almost single-handedly you helped save that act from what I thought was an unwarranted attack. So I want to thank you for that. And number two, my wife currently works for Children's Hospital, and I was there the other night at a demonstration of a making of a 3D heart and watched it made from the 3D printer. But it wasn't a live heart, it was a fiberglass heart that they made so that they could show the surgeons where the defect was, so the surgeon could see before he did the surgery how to operate. So I'd just like you to comment on what you might know about the development of a real heart by 3D methods.
Let me say that there are three parts to that. One, you do have that kind of 3D printing stuff, which is one of the things that Ross and I have both written about and are fascinated by. You've also gotten, I remember going back in 2000 or 2001 to National Science Foundation and looking at very large tables that created the effect of virtual reality. And they were being used so that you could take an MRI of your back and they could then blow up the spinal cord. And the surgeon could actually see what it was he was trying to deal with. And Callista and I visited a hospital in Eau Claire, Wisconsin about 3 years ago where they had brought that kind of model in, and they now used an MRI in the operating room to have real-time detailed look at your back while they were operating. And we're able to get dramatically better results with much less intrusion. So those things are happening. But what I was describing and what Governor Perry was describing to me in regenerative medicine, your goal is actually to create a living heart or to create a living pancreas. And the test is, can it be put back in the person, and do they then survive? And this is one of the challenges they have, frankly, in getting Food and Drug Administration approval, because the FDA model is based on pills, which is a mass quantification model, and regenerative medicine is a class of one. You know, if you need a spleen, can I grow and develop a spleen and put in you that works? It's a 1 and 0 issue. Because if it doesn't work, then it failed. If it does work, then you're fine. And we don't have any models of certification that are built around that kind of such a narrow focus and don't produce any quantitative data. And so it's a very interesting challenge, but the people I talk to are actually creating living organism or living organs that can actually be placed in a body. Austin, I think, is the Texas Regenerative Institute. The one I deal with the most is in Wake Forest, but there are a dozen. If you look up Google regenerative medicine, there are lots of people doing this now. It's cutting edge, but it's not rare. Somebody back here I thought had. Yes, ma'am.
Hello. I'm a freshman at American University in the School of International Service, and you've been mentioning these new technological advancements and advancements in medicine. But I'm wondering, what would you like to see from my generation? What would you like to see us pursue and see to try to change in this world, whether it be education focused or more on technology? Just want to get your thoughts on that.
Well, I think what I would urge you to do is, first of all, to immerse yourself in science and technology. When I was a student at Emory, I began playing with computers in my earliest experience was actually running an IBM card sorting machine, to show you how primitive that was. And so I've grown up all through modern computing, and I've played with it my whole career. And I would urge you to have the same kind of attitude of to just sort of look around. I mean, you can come into a place like this, and you can, if you go through the science and technology book area, you'll find lots of fascinating things. If you put your Google search with a couple of keywords, you'll just be flooded with opportunities. And the reason is you want to stretch your mind. There's a very famous lecture given in 1959 by C.P. Snow, who was a physicist, novelist, politician, ended up as a cabinet officer in the British government. And he gave the Wreath lecture on the BBC, and it became called The Two Cultures. And what he said was, in the 19th century, we expected an educated person to know Shakespeare and mathematics, to understand literature and science. He said, we have now separated so widely that we produce scientists who know an enormous amount and are totally inarticulate, and really articulate literally people who don't know anything. So if you see somebody on TV and you understand them, they probably don't know what they're talking about. But if you see somebody on TV who's totally incomprehensible, they probably know something, but you'll never know what it is. And it's a very interesting set of lectures. And I try to get young people to realize how much the world is changing. I mean, you see this from your smartphone. And then to let your imagination roam. The other interesting thing is, go back and look. I happen to like old movies. The original Sabrina's done about, I think, 1955. Humphrey Bogart, in totally implausible casting, is the romantic lead. And in order to show you how wealthy he has got in his car a radio telephone. So he can pick this up, and a radio in his car reaches an operator who then physically connects him to the telephone system. This is a sign of great wealth. By 1984, in Wall Street, to show you how wealthy the protagonist is, he's walking on the beach, talking on a cell phone that's about the size of a World War II walkie-talkie. If I were to go to my two grandchildren, our two grandchildren, Maggie and Robert, who are 14 and 12, and say to them, as a sign of your potential wealth, we're going to give you a cell phone, they would think I was nuts. But to show you how much different it is, Vince Haley, who works with us, has his younger daughter is 2.5. We were visiting Saturday a week ago. She was standing in the kitchen playing with her smartphone at 2.5. And people talk about digital natives and digital immigrants. Now, she's going to grow up in a world in which her brain is wired in ways I can't even imagine. And someday her generation are going to be in the military, and they're going to be in medicine, and they're going to be in Congress, and they will simply think profoundly differently about what they think is normal in the world, just as people who grew up in the oral tradition faced an enormous crisis with Gutenberg. Because all of a sudden, you had print, and you eliminated the great power of being able to remember, because now you could remind yourself. And by the way, a lot of people said it was the end of civilization because people would never again learn. I don't know if that's at all helpful.
Thank you.
One or two more, and then we'll be glad to sign books. I guess over here, and then I'll come back to you.
Sure. My question to you would be, at least in the introduction, there was a point about special interests being something that all these new initiatives may be bumping up against. At least as a citizen, my sense is that special interests get a little bit more time at the table with our current bureaucratic and political leaders. How then do citizens either help, grease the skids to make sure that reform comes through on a daily basis or in our political lives? And is it possible, do we have a systemic problem at the political, sort of citizen political level that we also have at the bureaucratic level?
I think that's a great question. Let me say, first of all, that my standard model is that the future has a publicist, but the past has a lobbyist. And if you just understand, that's sort of the way in which the model works. If we had had government this big in the 1840s, the stagecoaches would have hired a lobbyist to pass a law that said that no train could go faster than a horse because it's an unfair competitive advantage. Now, you may think that's an exaggeration, but I remember Ronald Reagan talking one time about the 1932 earthquake in Los Angeles. And he was working at WHO in Des Moines. And it was illegal to have radio news because the newspapers had convinced the Congress that the instant delivery of news by radio was an unfair competitive advantage. But he also knew that the people of Iowa, who had many relatives who'd gone to Los Angeles, were desperate to learn what was happening. And that was back when they piped in the big band from New York, and it would come in by across an open mic. And so they worked out this deal that every time they got a report from Los Angeles, from AP, they would accidentally turn down the music. And you would accidentally hear the engineer in Reagan talking about what they had just gotten. And then they would turn the music back up. And he closed, in typically Reagan fashion, by saying that the chilling effect of the last wire they got about 2 a.m, which was, the building is collapsing. So AP Los Angeles is signing off. Now think about this. All of this was illegal. So you start with the idea that the way the future beats the past is first it gets adopted and gradually simply overwhelms, Walmart gradually overwhelmed many of its competitors, not because it went out and hunted them down, but just because people voluntarily drove past them to get to Walmart. McDonald's overwhelmed a lot of competitors because people decided to go to McDonald's. Smartphones have beaten out payphones. How many payphones are left? I had a friend who was watching a movie, some of you remember, named No Way Out, about the Pentagon. And there's a scene where this guy is desperately trying to find a payphone. And her 15-year-old daughter turned to her and said, "Why isn't he just using his cell phone? I don't understand." So think of that. Part of it is competitive. The other is, and this is the purpose of writing the book and of things that we're going to be doing at Gingrich Productions, we want to arouse citizens to go say to their elected officials, I want you to be a champion of the future, not a prison guard of the past. And if I have to, and this is nonpartisan, and if you have to, I'm going to beat you if that's what it takes to get somebody in office who's going to champion the future. Because too much is at stake for us to let old-time interest groups stop us. We'll go to two less people. Yes, sir.
Okay. First of all, I want to thank, I'm not sure who does that, but having Newt here, and I guess the store doesn't usually have conservatives, so I applaud reaching out.
You missed his brilliant explanation that under new leadership they have deliberately broadened out. And I think this week, actually, the left might have some reason to argue because they brought in Krauthammer and Joe Scarborough. I mean, they have some grounds here for liberals to...
Great. That's great. I think that's great that you are, in terms of the topic, using sort of the STEM topic, but my question is in terms of transportation issues, energy issues, education, and how science will be moving it forward. I'm sort of concerned about, will this continue to create a division, will it eliminate sort of middle-class jobs if we only have people who can handle the sort of science side of it, the people who can do and move, become really web savvy and technically savvy, and then the other people who can't or aren't becoming technically savvy, and therefore there isn't that sort of future for them, and they can't. And maybe, North Dakota has some of that happening because of the energy and because of that, but other places might not have that. And who knows what's going to happen in 20 years, but it seems like certain places have that rush and that web technology, and then certain people don't know or maybe resist or whatever. And so there doesn't seem to be necessarily a guarantee for, or don't have the opportunity for, future middle-class jobs. It seems like there will still be, and that's not political, and that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that doesn't seem to be necessarily a job creator, where it does seem like the future is transportation, is energy, is all of those things that you would address on your title.
Let me be very politically incorrect. One, jobs die.
Right.
Okay. I mean, once upon a time, we had lots of people who went out and trapped furs. At one point, the vast majority of Americans farmed. If you'd said to people in 1850, do you realize that 3% of the country will be farming by 2010? They'd have said, "My God, the unemployment would be massive." Well, no. People learned new trades, new jobs. We invented Disney World, which employs an amazing number of people. We invented things like the motion picture industry, which employs an amazing number of people. The question is, can you build a model that invents high-value jobs at a rate faster than you lose the old jobs? And second, can you design learning programs that are transitional? I'll give you two quick examples. Since we know we can design online learning, and whether you're talking about Kaplan or you're talking about Udacity or Khan Academy or or the big MOOCs that are now being built, the massive open courses that MIT and Harvard and Yale and others are doing. One of my proposals is that all unemployment compensation require learning. I mean, if we're going to pay for 168 hours a week, I am totally, and this will be a great debate in the country, I am totally opposed to the idea that I owe somebody 99 weeks of deer hunting and bass fishing. If we need to take care of somebody because they currently aren't employable, then I want them to spend those 99 weeks getting at least an associate degree, and ideally getting probably a 4-year degree, because you can actually learn faster online than you're going to learn in a traditional school. So I start with that. Second, I want to see a system where we have dramatically more entrepreneurship. We ran into the gentleman who created the Grameen Bank from Bangladesh, who I was astonished at. I'd always sort of thought the Grameen Bank gives very small micro lending to women, only to women, in order to help them start businesses to further the economic development of Bangladesh and to liberate women. They've been doing it now for 35 years. He said, I run into people who say I'm unemployed. He said, what do you mean you're unemployed? He said, I'm unemployed. He said, you didn't create a job? You haven't founded a business? What do you mean you're unemployed? Why are you passive? And I was stunned at how aggressive he was with this whole model of saying people have got to get back in the habit of getting up in the morning and doing something. Which gets me to my last point about this. We have a whole chapter on poverty. Ideally, someday I'd like it to evolve into a book in its own right. We have to rethink from the ground up what we're doing to trap children in poverty. And we have to understand that we have policies today that make it likely that people will stay in poverty. I mean, we fought the war on poverty under Lyndon Johnson, and we lost. And we have not had the moral courage to rethink what we're doing. And when you go out and talk to people who actually understand this stuff, they'll tell you, you want people to have a habit of going to work from an early age. We have a friend in Illinois we just had dinner with Monday night who helps 6- and 7-year-olds in the south side of Chicago. They come to their house in the suburbs. The first thing they do is they say, gee, would you go out and get the newspaper? Kid goes out, gets the newspaper. They give him 25 cents or 50 cents. They give him 50 cents. Within 3 hours, the kid is following them around the house saying, what else can I do? Because all of a sudden they have an incentivized way of actually earning money. And they start to change. And I would argue, if you combine things like the Khan Academy with genuine direct incentives, you would be astonished within 2 or 3 years how many young people would be earning a lot of money, rising, breaking out of the system, and how much we would begin to end inequality in America. You have to be the last person.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I'm a visitor from Australia, so thank you for mentioning us earlier, and thank you for putting on something like this. I've been Chief of Staff to Australian ministers in our federal and our state parliament. I'm what I call a baby politician. I'm Deputy Mayor of a council. But I can tell you in Australia the same thing's happening. There is a problem. So I just wonder whether you thought about whether you think it's an issue that is a global problem, or is it just specific to the US, or whether the solutions are actually global or domestic.
I'm sorry, I missed the very first part.
So do you think that it is an issue or a systemic problem replicated in other countries? And
the problem of inequality?
Oh, the problem in terms of blockages in the system to get things
yeah, sure.
done.
No, it's a worldwide problem.
And then is the solution actually a global one rather than a domestic one?
Well, I don't know how you would execute a global problem because the UN is sort of a case study in corruption and bureaucratic behavior. So, I mean, I don't know of the venue you'd bring people together. We're actually talking with a group that have formed a Lean Six Sigma management association in 54 different countries. And they've asked us to talk to them about trying to help develop a model to get each of the 54 countries. So I think my closing answer would be, Callista and I have been a fair number of places, and with the singular exception of the Rural Bank of China, there's no place where I put my ATM card in that hasn't worked. For some reason, the Agricultural Bank of China is not connected to the worldwide ATM system. But every other bank in China was, so it just meant you walked across the street. Virtually everywhere, people use cell phones that look exactly alike. I mean, have you noticed this? Wherever you are on the planet, the Korean phones are actually slightly bigger now because they have a better screen. But as a general principle, they're all basically the same. Partly because your ear and your mouth are about the same. Now, the point I'm making is, if somebody somewhere, and I hope Breakout will be a part of this, if somebody somewhere begins to figure the model out, it will gradually, slowly move across the whole planet because people gradually adopt things that work. That's why, I mean, if you go back and look at the planet, say, in 1870, and now you look at the planet today and you say, how many places do you now have cars? How many places do you now have McDonald's? How many places do you now have pizza? I mean, I'm just using very common everyday things. How many places do people wear pants? Which was not common in 1850 or 1870. And you begin to suddenly realize that there is an ability of culture and of technology to spread that's pretty amazing. And so my hope is, if you think of this as the technology of self-government, that we'll be able with Breakout to get people excited about developing a better future. Let me just say, Callista and I are both delighted to be with you. Any of you who do like what we're doing, my one request would be to put it on Facebook, tweet it if you do that, and send out a note to your friends on email list, because penetrating the culture at large, getting people to understand that Breakout matters and that Ellis the Elephant matters is really a big part of our mission in life. Thank you all very much.